Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Building Better Brains. Today I want to talk about if your child is often perceived as lazy, if they are mistaken for being just not putting their full effort in, and maybe you're even wondering, are they lazy? Do they have a learning difficulty? What is really going on? And maybe you hear this from the school as well. Maybe it's a topic of debate between you and your partner. So I had a client, his name was Josh, and that's what happened. And so Brandy Blonde in her book, Symphony of Reflexes, actually explains that if the TLR reflex, the tonic labyrinthine reflex, is retained, it will have major impacts on education. It will often have global effects with learning delays and so forth. And that is because it is so deeply connected. One of the reasons anyways, because it's so deeply connected to vestibular function. And if you have been following me for a while, if you haven't, check out my videos, but I talked about vestibular function and how it is the CEO of the brain, how it connects all of the other senses, how it activates the nervous system to send the correct messages to the brain, and so forth. And that's a really siphoned down version, but basically to keep it really simple. So TLR and vestibular system is connected. This impacts or relates to the inner ear, which connects to auditory processing. And so when the TLR is retained, there will often be auditory processing issues. This is obviously going to affect learning. It will affect the ability to follow instructions, particularly if they're oral instructions. It will often impact reading phonemic awareness because there's that auditory piece to be able to hear the sounds accurately and blend them and so forth. Processing, memorizing information, all of that type of stuff. So basically what happens is that the TLR assists with head control in infancy. And when a child engages in tummy time, what they're basically doing is they're slowly learning to develop head control. They're developing those neck muscles, those shoulder muscles, those upper back muscles as they're kind of lifting themselves off the ground. They're not moving yet and so forth. And what this really does, this development helps to prepare the body for crawling. And so the TLR also makes connections in the temporal, helps to assist with creating connections in the temporal lobe of the brain. And what that results in is better sequencing. The temporal lobe of the brain is very much connected to our ability to sequence. And this is really important for a lot of things that our kids do academically and even in everyday life. So things like reading is really important for sequencing. Just never mind retelling the events of a story accurately, even things as simple as breaking down the sounds of a word in order so that we're not skipping over sounds or skipping over words. Obviously with spelling, with movement as well. So being able to move our body accurately, we often see with kids with learning difficulties, poor coordination, or maybe even a diagnosis of dyspraxia. And so sometimes it's the sequencing or the timing even that could be off in their brain. And so the TLR also, because it is so instrumental in preparing the body for crawling, it is necessary to help also integrate the STNR and ATNR reflex, which I talked about last time and is really important and plays a huge role if those reflexes are retained in ADHD, dyslexia, learning difficulties, and so forth. So let's talk how vision and balance are connected. So if the TLR is retained, what's really going to happen is that incorrect messages are going to be sent between the brain. Incorrect messages might be sent between the brain and the receptors that are responsible for knowing where the body is in space. And this is going to impact the function of the eyes. And keep in mind, so the eyes or vision and balance are part of the same neurological loop in the brain. And so if balance is off, then visual processing will be off. So what happens is that obviously we know information is passed back and forth between the eyes and the brain regarding the head's movement or the head's position and body location. And so this what results is that the body makes adjustments according to how the head is located, and this helps to stabilize the eyes. And this is obviously if everything is going well, the TLR is integrated, and everything is functioning optimally. And so what happens is that if the TLR is retained, there is going to be issues with body movement, there is going to be issues with movement with the eyes, so eye tracking, saccadic eye movements, all of that type of stuff, as well as even impacting visual perception, such as depth perception, distance, space, all of that type of stuff. So as I mentioned, it will impact movement and coordination. TLR deeply is connected to issues with dyspraxia. You definitely want to look at that. And again, these kids are often considered lazy when the TLR is retained. And that's because they do things like they slump, they're either like this, or they're holding themselves up, or they're laying on their desk, or they're kind of leaning back and their legs are extended. So they're not really able to sit up nice and straight. They can, but it feels very uncomfortable. It's very tiring. It requires a lot of energy. And then as a result, it compromises their focus and their attention. And so you might be wondering at this point, like, what are the signs of a retained TLR? So the signs of a retained TLR could be things like blah, 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 blah. Okay.